your sweet love away, but you stay right here beside me, never letting me go. Now I know the love I needed was right here all along. I know that love to forgive all the hurt and pain. Love is enough to remove all the guilt and shame. Love is enough to make up for the truth I made. I know that love is enough. God's love is enough. God's love is enough. God's love is enough. God's love is enough.
All right. God's love is enough. Love is enough. I say on today that love is more than enough. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Oliver Blue, and we are once again gathered together in this what I call sacred space called Truly Foundation. And I am so delighted to be your temporary guide, your host today as we look into our next lesson from A Course in Miracles, lesson number 99, the double nines. And this is a very important message or lesson as we get into today's lesson. And it is a subject that we've already talked about. And but what we're going to see is the oneness. What we're going to see is how consistent these workbook lessons are, and how they're all connected, and how if you listen to one message, one lesson, you basically listen to all the lessons. That's how simple these workbook lessons are. This is how integrated that they are, and this is how effective they can be if we give ourselves over to the ideas and if we would practice the ideas during the day. And so just want to say thank you for being here with me this morning. Today we're going to look at lesson 99. Lesson 99. And the idea for today states that salvation is my only function here, or that salvation is our collective function here. Function has to do with the way that something operates. The way that something operates is its function. Is it, or maybe we could actually say, is our only purpose here. It's the reason and the way. So salvation, as we have already defined, is a promise made by God. From the point of view of A Course in Miracles, salvation is merely a promise that has been made by God that all humanity will eventually find their way back home, or find their way back to reality, or find their way back to God, or find their way back to love, or as we can say it even more succinctly, that all humanity will find themselves. And when they find themselves, they'll find God, they'll find reality, they'll find the oneness that they always have been. They will find their nature, they will find their function, their purpose. All is in the one. All is in the one. And so prior to my study of A Course in Miracles, of course, I've had a different idea of what salvation is. But here, from the Course's perspective, it is merely a promise that's made by the Creator God. And if the Creator God has made a promise, and he promised himself or made an oath with himself, based on what? Based on its own, based on its own self. There's a scriptural reference that said God could not find anything greater than himself to swear by, so he swore by himself. And he made an oath or a promise. And that oath and that promise basically had to do with the fact that God is and there is nothing else. That God remains as God is, and what God creates remains as it is. What God creates or extends remains as it is. Nothing can attack it, nothing can destroy it, nothing can infiltrate it, nothing can violate it, because there is nothing else. And that all things outside of God basically are illusions. And when we say illusions, meaning they are not real, because God is real. There only can be something made within a mind that seemingly is separate from him. And so we use the terms dreams or um, imaginings or fantasies. And the course goes on to even use stronger words like hallucinations, where we just make it up in a mind that's separated. That's the only thing that seemingly exists outside of God. There's only the thoughts of God. All other thoughts are what? Dreams, imaginings, fantasies, illusions. They're not real. They don't hold any water. They can't they can't hold themselves. Only the thoughts of God are self-sustaining. Only the thoughts of God are self-sustaining, because only God is real. God is the only reality. And so with that said, salvation is now becomes our only function. So the process of not only embracing this reality for ourselves that of God's promise, but we embrace this idea for that that seems to be outside of God. We hold this thought, this idea for ourselves, that salvation is our only function here, as well as for those that um, are still seemingly out of the way, or out on their own in a split mind, thinking that they're separate. So we hold that those thoughts, and that's our purpose. That's our function for being here. So salvation and forgiveness, it starts out by saying that salvation and forgiveness are the same. They're one and the same. And both of these concepts are or ideas or concept that actually happens in time and space. There's no need for salvation nor forgiveness in timelessness or in formlessness, or in, like we say, in heaven. In God, there's no need for salvation or forgiveness, because there's nothing to save and there's nothing to forgive. Heaven is intact. God is intact. Nothing has happened. So uh, these are ideas that only work in time and space, or only needed in time and space. In reality, we need no forgiveness, because we haven't done anything. We have not done anything. What we do in dreams or in imaginings, what we do in fantasies or hallucinations, they're nothing. So they don't need forgiving. We don't need to be saved from them, because they're nothing. But because we think that there's something, because we think that there's something, we think that's where we are. We think that's what we need, because we really think we're separate. And these ideas are useful in time and space. Salvation and forgiveness are one. They're one and the same. It goes on to say that they both imply that something has gone wrong. So there's an implication that something has gone wrong if there's a need for salvation and forgiveness. But has something really gone wrong? It says something needs to be saved from. And what's had gone wrong is that there's something that needs to be saved from, forgiven or forgiven for. So what is that something that we need to be saved from or forgiven for? It's going to go on to tell us. It says that something amiss that needs corrective change. So the whole idea is that it implies that something has gone wrong, something needs to be saved from, something needs to be forgiven for, and something is amiss and need corrective change. Something apart or different from the will of God. So what we're saying here is that only the will of God exists. But apparently, it appears that something has gone wrong, because there's something outside of the will of God that it has gotten the attention of the sons and daughters of God. And we know that there is nothing outside of the will of God but illusions and dreams and imaginings and fantasies. But to us, who seemingly are split off from our Creator, it appears that something has gone wrong to us. And does both of these, salvation and forgiveness, imply a thing impossible, but yet which has occurred? And what is the thing impossible? It's impossible for what? For us to be split off from God. It's absolutely impossible. There is God and nothing else. So the possibility of separation would have to show up in a dream or a fantasy or an imagining or an hallucination, because it's absolutely impossible. There is only oneness. There is only God. So the thought that one becomes two or three or four are multiplied, like we see billions and billions of things and peoples, it appears that something has gone wrong. It appears that way. I mean, you look at the world that we're in, or you look at ourselves, we look at it like a separated self. You look at the multiplicity of things in the room that you're sitting in. It seems like there's not one, there's multiplicity. It seems that way, but is it real? Or is it in a dream? Or is it within a fantasy or an imagining or a hallucination? Or are we hallucinating that we're separate bodies, separate cells on this planet that is billions and billions of multiple things? Is this the reality, or is it a fantasy? Is it a dream? That is the question. And it says something apart of or different from the will of God has become real. It says, thus the both terms imply that a thing impossible but yet has occurred. So did the impossible occur? Did the tiny mad idea of separation actually occur? Or was it just a vain imagining, a dream, a fantasy, or hallucination? Is this world real? Is this body, self, identity real? And we define early in our training what reality is versus what is not real. Let me remind you that we said this is the measuring stick to determine whether something is real or not. It says that it is knowledge, or it's a knowing, meaning it's an experience. It is truth, meaning what? It remains truth, meaning what? It remains that way all the time. It said it is one law, the law of love or the law of God. If something real it's unalterable, meaning it can't be changed. It's eternal, meaning it has no beginning, no end. It's unambiguous, meaning what? There's no other option. It can be unrecognized, but it can't be what? It can't be changed. It's changeless. So something that is changeless is real. We said that if it's real, it's everything that God created. So God is the only creator there is. And what God creates is what is likened to himself. It says only God or love creates reality. Why? Because only God or love is reality. We says that reality is beyond something that you can learn. It says we said that there's no opposites to reality. So unreality does not exist. If something is real, that means that unreality does not exist. It says that it has no beginning. In other words, reality has always been, and it says it has no end. Reality will always be. And then the final thing, it says it merely is. God is. That's the measuring stick to determine whether something is real or not. So when you look at these bodies that we're not in, but you look at these bodies that we are aware of, you look at everything in this room that you're uh, look at everything in the room that you're in, all this stuff, all these things, are they real? Are they eternal? Will they last? Do they change? And when you look at the definition of what is real, you would say that everything around us is not real. Why? Because it has a beginning and an end. It comes and goes. It's based on interpretation, not on facts. It has births and death. It's founded on the belief in scarcity, loss, separation, and death. It's learned um, rather than known. It's selective in its emphasis. It's unstable in its function and inaccurate in its interpretation. Everything around us. All we got to look at is with one definition: change less. Everything around us changes. It changes on a dime. So none of this physical world that we see can be defined as real. It's only temporary. So it has to be put in the category of imaginings, fantasies, dreams, or hallucinations. However, it appears that something has occurred, resulting in a state of conflict between what is and what could never be. So the conflict is that God is and God remains as he is, and what God creates remains as God created it. And the conflict is there's a world here of change in time and space. Is it real? That's the conflict. And so it says, the conflict is between what is, God is, and what could never be. What could never be was what? Anything outside of God. That's the conflict. Is this world real? Is this world outside of God? Did we really accomplish separation? Or did we fall into a trance or into a dream? It says, truth and illusions. So the truth is God is, the illusion is what? The separation. It says truth and illusions both are equal now. Why? Because we believe that this world is real. We believe in our body identification. So it says truth and illusion are both equal, but it's not real. Equal in the sense that what? We're giving our credence to the unreal. It says, for both have happened. God is, and then what? There's something else. It appears that what? There is something else. In the dream, it appears that there is something else. There are multiple bodies, and there's a world of time and space, a world of perception. It says the impossible becomes the thing that needs forgiveness. So it is what needs forgiveness is the impossible, which is what? That separation occurred. That man was able to what? Escape the oneness, break up the oneness to make what? Two-ness or multiplicity. It appears that way because we find ourselves in a world of multiplicity, in a world that has its own laws that are separate from God, a world that has all these individual beings that gives off the impression that they're what? More than one being. In other words, this world is an attack on the integrity of God. This world is almost like this is the evidence that God has been broken into what? Billions and billions of pieces. And like the fairy tale or like the story said, they couldn't put Humpty back together again. That oneness was what? Oneness was not, did not have integrity. That love was not real. Love failed. That is the implication. That is the idea. And that is what has tempted all humanity to put their allegiance, to put their credence in the unreal versus that which is real. So we would have to be what? Dreaming, imagining, fantasizing, and hallucinating. And that's the seeming conflict. Thus, the need for what? Salvation and forgiveness. We need to be saved from that illusion, and we need to be forgiven for dreaming up the illusion. And we need to forgive the dream that we made up. Give that dream up, walk away from it, give it up for reality. That's what forgiveness is. And forgiveness also says what we thought happened didn't happen. It never occurred. What you thought your brother did not occur. And it also says forgiveness, so it says that forgiveness is our function. It says salvation is our function. That's why they say salvation and forgiveness are the same. It says forgiveness is our function as the light of the world. It says our happiness and our functions are one and the same. So we got forgiveness, we got salvation, and we got happiness that are all one and the same. So when we forgive what did not happen, and when we hold on to the promise that heaven is intact, that God is, that I am, it results in our what? It results in our happiness. Therein lies our happiness. There is no happiness without salvation and forgiveness. There is no happiness. And so as long as we play along with the game, as long as we keep the dream going, as long as we take reality and try to make it unreality, or take unreality and make it reality, there is no happiness. So happiness is what? But a recognition, enlightenment, salvation, awakening. It's when we recognize that all that is not real. And we like the song say, we find our way back to find our way back to reality. When we come to realize that love is enough. God's love is enough. God's love is all there is. There's no need for nothing else. Within God's love is everything. And so we see now how this seemingly conflict has played out. You got this dream over here, and you got the reality here. And you got this seemingly separated, split mind that is giving its credence to the dream, but reality is not affected at all by it. In fact, reality don't even recognize the dream. So there comes a dream and a dreamer. Who's the dreamer? It's the son that has fallen asleep. The dreamer is our belief that we're separate and have fallen into a dream. We are the dreamer of the dream. The split mind is the dreamer of the dream. That's what needs healing. That's what needs salvation. That's what needs forgiveness. And that's not even who we are. We remain in the heart of God as awareness, as consciousness, observing the whole. We're observing this whole drama playing out. That's why we can stand apart from all of the things in the world and just look and see what's going on. And know that it's a fantasy. You know how it is. Sometimes you look at things and you can look right through it, and say that ain't real, that ain't right. That's your awareness self. That's your real self. Looking past, looking through, and looking past all the falsity that is on display. You can look right through it. And no, it's not real. No, someone is just putting on a facade, as they say. And so truth and illusion both are equal now, for both have what happened. The impossible becomes the things that need forgiveness for and salvation from. So we need forgiveness for and salvation from the illusion of the impossibility of separation. It says salvation now becomes the borderline between truth and illusion. So salvation becomes like the middle ground where you got truth on one side and illusion on the other. It seems that way. And in the middle is what the salvation, which was God's promise. Right in the middle of reality and unreality is the promise of God. And it appears that there's a decision to be made by the what? Prodigal son who has gone aloof. Is he choosing for the world or is he choosing for what? His father's home. It appears that there's a decision to be made. And that decision is called what? The borderland is called salvation. It says salvation now become the borderland between the truth and the illusion. It reflects the truth because it is the means by which you can escape the illusion. God's promise is the means by which you can escape the illusion. What did God promise us? That all humanity will eventually what? Wake up and find their way back home. That's your out. That's our way back onto the main road. We took a detour in the darkness. The way for us to get back on the on ramp to light, to reality, is through what? The remembrance of God, the remembrance of ourselves, and the promise and the guarantee that God has made with himself. So it says, it reflects the truth because it is the means by which you can escape illusions. Yet it is not yet the truth because it undoes what was never done. So salvation undoes, it doesn't do anything, it undoes, it's an undoing of what was never done. And what was never done? We were never separated. We were never separate. Separation never happened. We're going to pause right there, and I have to step away for a moment. So bear with me, and we'll play a little music. Okay. I have something going on outside I have to take care of. Step away for one moment. All right. Okay. So we have set up this, so the plot has been set up. And yet it is not, it says, yet it is not yet the truth, because it undoes what was never done. Salvation is not the truth. Forgiveness is not the truth. But forgiveness and salvation are useful in this particular dilemma where you got reality and unreality. And salvation and forgiveness comes as a borderland. As a way what? As a way to give us a way back home. It becomes like a directional sign, pointing us what? Back home, back to reality. So you could look at salvation and forgiveness as pointers, pointing us back what? To reality. Say, no, there's nothing over here. All that's over here is illusions, fantasies and dreams and what? Imaginings and hallucinations. So salvation and forgiveness merely points us back home. And part of that pointing, and the reason it points us back there, because what? Within salvation is the promise of God. That God cannot lie. Within salvation is God's promise. It is the foundation of what? Salvation. God has made a promise. And he promised that what he created remained as it is. And God only created one thing, and he created what we call himself. He calls it the I am. And we find ourselves as that I am, as part of it. Not something separate from God, but we're a part of the one creation of God. We're a part of the one being that God is. In other words, we are God. Let's just get down to the nitty-gritty. Quit playing around with it. We are love and form. That's who you are. That's where the conflict is. We don't believe it. That's who you are. Not these bodies, but your awareness, your consciousness. That is what God is. And that is what you are. That is what God extended himself. God is consciousness. God is what? God is what? Awareness. If you wasn't aware and if you wasn't conscious, no, you wouldn't exist. But you exist because you're aware and because you're conscious. That's what makes you like God. So relax in there. That's not what? It's not anything to be afraid of. It's something what? To settle into and become what? Comfortable with. It's called what? Knowing yourself. Becoming what? Comfortable in your what? In your own self. It says, how could there be a meeting place at all where earth and heaven can be reconciled within a mind where both of them exist? It's a question. The mind that sees illusion thinks them real. See? A mind that sees illusion thinks them real. So it can't be the mind of God. It would have to be what? A mind that's seemingly split off from God. That's what? Out on its own. It says they have existence in that they are thoughts. So it's just what? It's just a thought of separation. It says, and yet they are not real. So the thought of separation is not a real thought. Why? Because it's not according to the will of God. Did not come from the mind of God. Where did it come from? Well, that's the $1 billion question. That's the question that the ego would have you ask. A question that can't be answered. And so because the mind that thinks these thoughts is separate from God, see, it would have to be. And we know that anything separate from God is an illusion. So the illusion and the thought is nothing. So nothing becomes what? Something. and puts itself as equal with what? Equal with God. So can you imagine something opposing as having equality with God? Nothing opposing that is have equality with everything. There's no contest. There's not a contest. What that tells you how strong dreams and fantasies and imaginations can be. And we know the power of imagination. we know the power of imagination. We have access to that faculty. We imagine all the time. We dream all the time. Yes. But all those dreams, all those imaginings, according to what the will of God, because there's only one will, and that's God's, and it's yours. That's what Jesus meant when he said, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." So, what joins the separated mind and thoughts? So you got the separated minds and you got the separated mind thoughts over here on the unreality, and on the other side you got the mind of God and the thoughts of God on the other side, which are forever one. It says, so what can join the two? What can join? Can reality join with unreality? Can illusions join with God? Can that really possibly happen? It says, what plan could hold the truth inviolate, yet recognize the need illusions bring, and offer means by which they are undone without attack, in which no touch and with no touch of pain. So we got reality, you got unreality. So you got everything and you got nothing. How can they join? It's impossible. But there is a need to do away with what? The unreality. And that's what it appears that humanity is dealing with. Illusion on one side, God on the other side. And humanity thinks that the illusion is real. So how do you what? How do you undo? How do you get humanity what? To relinquish or to release the illusion? That's where salvation and what? Forgiveness come into play. And so it says, how can we now fix this without giving the appearance that reality is attacking unreality or making the error real? How can God reconcile? How can all this be reconciled without attack? Because it appears that what? Something has occurred. And God has lost something. And so now God got to go on the attack to get it back. It appears that way. But here it says, here's what it says. It says, yet recognize the need the illusion brings and offer means by which it is undone without attack and with no touch of pain. So God said this thing could be painless. You can wait. So waking up can be painless. Is what he's saying. He's saying to awaken to the reality can be painless. To become enlightened can be painless. To be what? To have a rebirth can be painless. Resurrection can be painless, is what he's saying. You don't have to hit rock bottom. You don't have to have all the pain and suffering in the illusion. You can come out of this thing without any scars. With all your what? All your limbs, all your what? With all your sanity intact. That's what God has said. He said it's only a dream. You really don't have to put the gun to your head. Delusion is not true. Who you think you are, is not a reality. Put the gun down. Put the needles down. Put the drugs down. Put the hatred down. Put your fears down. This can be painless. Through what? My promise. And through what? And through my forgiveness. Use my promise. And use what? Use forgiveness to make this what? Painless shift, this painless transition. I know I'm like sounding a little comical here, but but that's really what is the dilemma of humanity. You look at the world that we're in. You look at the suffering, the anxiety, the fear, the killings, the destruction that's going on right now. That's because what? They believe that what? The dream is real. And God is saying what? Lay down your guns. Lay down your hatred. Lay down your unforgiveness. Lay down your misperceptions about yourself and about me and about your neighbor. He said, just lay it all aside. He said, this can be painless and come on back home. I don't know if you ever had or grew up in a house where one of the siblings ran away from home, or you had your own home, your own family, and one of your kids ran away from home. I don't know if you went through that before, but you know how painful that could be. When you finally get up with the sibling or the child, you know, you're trying to talk sense into them. Come on back home. Everything is gonna be cool. And they got the guns drawn. No, I'm not coming back. I'm gonna shoot myself. And you're like, no, doesn't have to be any pain. There doesn't have to be any drama. There doesn't have to be a tragedy. Everything is well. So this is kind of the human dilemma, where what you see out in the world that is loveless, what you see out in the world that is promoting separation and division and inequality, that is all happening in a dream that they believe that is true. And they have run away from the truth. And without some type of plan of salvation, you know, they could possibly destroy themselves or hurt themselves in the dream. And in reality, nothing's really happening, but this is the nightmare that they're having. And so God is saying, what? I promise I'm not holding this against you. And then God said, what? Forgive the whole thing. Just let it go as though it's never happened. Forgiveness. That's what forgiveness is. And there's a decision to be made by the runaway child. There was a song made back in the 70s. I can't remember who made the song. It was called Runaway Child, Running Wild. You better come back home where you belong. That was the song. Runaway child, running wild. So humanity is like a runaway child running wild. And God is saying, well, come on back home where you belong. Wow. So nothing has really happened. Nothing has really happened. But in this setup, it appears that something has on the same level of God or reality. So how do you work your way out of this dilemma? Well, God introduced what he calls salvation, God's plan for salvation and forgiveness. And if we follow God's plan for salvation and forgiveness, the result would be happiness. So happiness, salvation, and forgiveness are all one and the same. They all come together in a package deal. You can't leave one out. You can't leave the promise out. You can't leave what? You can't leave forgiveness out. Nothing happened. And happiness will be left out. If there's no salvation, if there's no what? There's no forgiveness. Because what? We will think that we are in this nightmare and can't find our way home. And you're not going to be happy. Like the prodigal son, he wasn't happy. He ended up in a pig pen eating the what? Food of the pigs. You think he was happy? Absolutely not. He was used to eating steaks and ribeyes, prime ribs. So it says, what but God's thoughts? What? So how? What is the answer to all this dilemma? What is the answer? It says, what but a thought of God could be this plan? What but a thought of God could be this plan by which the never done is overlooked? What is the never done? Separation. That we overlook it, because if it's never done, then what? We can easily overlook it. If we know that what? Separation is impossible, we can easily overlook it. If you know that a thing but doesn't exist, you can easily overlook it. If you know that a thing is just a shadow, it's just a shadow, it's not real, you can easily overlook it. If you know that the cloud is what? Empty, and it has no water, then you can what? Go ahead and put your clothes on and have your outdoor activity, because it's not going to rain. It's just what? An empty cloud. You can overlook it and go on with your plans. When we know that something is not what real, we can what? Overlook it. Why? Because it what? It has no effects. It's just a shadow. It's just an appearance. So when we see people, when we see our brothers and sisters that are suffering, when we see humanity that appears that it's in a destructive mode, we can overlook it, in the sense that we know that in reality, there's just a call for love. The nightmare that they seem to be experiencing is only because what? They're in dreams, imaginings, illusions, hallucinations. And so the miracle is what? We can look on devastation and know what? That is not true. That is the miracle. We've had a what? Shift in perception. So we can look on a world that appears to be what? Falling apart, and know that it's not true. Why? Because it's what? It's not the will of God. It is not God's will. So anything that we look upon that is not the will of God, what? We can look past it. We can look past it. And in looking past it, what? We maintain our peace. And looking past it, what? We don't make the error real. We don't make the dream real and get caught up in the movie ourselves. Because that's what God does. God only knows love. God only knows light. So God's not even aware of darkness. Darkness happens only in dreams and illusions and imaginings and in fantasies. It says, what but a thought of God could be this plan by which the never done is overlooked? And sins forgotten which were never real. So so sins are forgiven that was never real. And we overlook what was never done. Separation was never done. And dreaming that it did, we forgive that because it was never real. And so it says, the Holy Spirit or the whole Spirit or our real self hold the plan of God exactly as it was received of Him within the mind of God and in our minds. It is apart from time in that its source is timeless. So the plan of God is timeless. It says, yet it operates in time because of our belief that time is real. There's no need for forgiveness or salvation in timelessness. But because we believe that we're in time, that is where it's needed. And it says, unshaken does the spirit or our reality look on what we see, on sin and pain and death, on grief and separation and loss. He says, what? Unshaken by what appears in the forms of sin, pain, death, grief, separation, and loss. It says, yet does what? Yet does yet does we look, yet does we know that the one thing must still be true, and that is God is still love, and this is not his will. So again, we can look on when we wake to the truth, when we become aware of the truth, when we have awakened from the dream of separation, we can look on the dream and know that it's not true. We can look at all the events, all the activities that are happening within the dream of separation and know that it's not true. Because we know this one thing, that God is still love. And we can look on all the loveliness in the world and know that it's not true. And this is not the will of our Father. So we overlook it. We look past it. It says, this is the thought that brings illusions to the truth. What thought? God is still love. This is not his will. So when we take the thought of God and bring what? The illusions to the truth. It says, and see them as appearances, behind which is the changeless and the what? And the sure. So these appearances in the form of illusions, we know they're not true. So we bring them to the truth and we look past them. It says, this is the thought that saves and that forgives, because it lays no faith in what is not created by the only source we know. So we have no faith. We put no faith, no confidence, no credence in illusions. That is what an awakened being does. This is our function as awakened beings. This is how we function now as awakened beings. This is how we deal with the world of dreams. It says, this is the thought whose function is to save by giving you its function as your own. Salvation is your function, which the one to whom the plan was given. So God has given us what? The plan of salvation. While we're still here in time and space. His salvation is our function, which is the one to whom the plan was given. Now are we entrusted with this plan along with God. He has one answer. He has one answer to appearances, regardless of their form. So regardless of what's the form of the separation in the world, we only have one answer. And regardless of what form, what size, or the depth or the attributes that they seem to have. And what is the one answer? Salvation is my only function here. God still is love, and this is his will. This is not his will. So when we look upon devastation, we look past it, and we say salvation is our function because God still is love, regardless of the devastation, and that this is his will. In other words, we are no longer what? Taken in by the illusions. You who will yet work miracles, be sure you practice well the idea for today. So today we're going to practice this idea. Salvation is our only function. God is still love, and this is not his will. When we look on illusion, try to perceive the strength in what you say, for these are words in which you feel freedom. in which your freedom lies. Your Father loves you. All the world of pain is not his will. Forgive yourself this thought. He wanted this for you. Then let the thought with which he has replaced all your mistakes enter the darkened places in your mind. That thought, the thoughts that never were his will. So we take this idea that God is still love and this is not his will when we look upon what the illusion. And we allow that thought to replace any thought that we ever entertained that was God's will. And it says this part belongs to God and does the rest. It does not think its solitary thoughts and makes them real by hiding them from him. Let in the light, and you will look upon no obstacle to what he wills for you. Open your secrets to his kindly light and see how bright this light still shines to you. So we use the idea for today for a cleansing of our own self. We go into our own mind, and where we're still maybe hanging on to illusions, we let them go free. We let them go. We shine the light in every thought, every imagining in our heart. This is how we free ourselves. It says, this is God's part. This is what God does. As we will open ourselves up to the idea that salvation is what? Our only function. It says, practice his thought today. What is his thoughts? Salvation is my only function here. It says, and let his light seek out and lighten up all darkened spots and shine through them to join them to the rest. It is God's will your mind be one with his. It is God's will that he has but one son. It is God's will that his one son is you. We remain as what God created us. He says, think of these things in practicing today and start the lesson that we learn today with this instruction in the way of truth. And so we say salvation is my only function here. Salvation and forgiveness are the same. Then turn to him who shares your function here and let him teach you what you need to learn to lay all fear aside and know your true self as love, which has no opposite in you. Forgive all thoughts which would oppose the truth of your completion, unity, and peace. You cannot lose the gift your Father gave. You do not want to be another self. You have no function that is not of God. Forgive yourself the one you think you made. Forgiveness and salvation are the same. Forgive what you have made, and you are saved. So the self we made, we forgive it. We let it go. So every idea that we made, we let them go. Every illusion, we let them go. It says, this is a special message for today, which has the power to remove all forms of doubt and fear forever from your mind. If you are tempted to believe them true, remember that appearances cannot withstand the truth. These mighty words contain, salvation is my only function here. God is still love, and this is not his will. Our only function tells us we are one. Remind ourselves of this between the times that we give 5 minutes to be shared with him, who share God's plan with us. Remind ourselves all during this day that salvation is my only function here. It says, thus do we lay forgiveness on our mind and let all fear be gently laid aside, that love may find its rightful place in us and show us that we are indeed the children of God. So in conclusion, this is the plan. Salvation is our only function. And we lay aside every illusion that we ever given credence to. and know ourselves, our true self. And so salvation concludes that what? That I am and that I remain as God created me. We remain as God created us. And all the dreams, all the illusions, all the imaginings, all the fantasies, they just what? Disappear. They have no life. Because the only life there is the life of God. And we are that. I rest my case. Thank you so much. That's lesson 99. So as you go through your day, it is the thought of God that is your what? That is your way out of every illusion. Salvation is our only function. Love is still intact. And when we see illusions, that which appear to be, and is not, we say this is not the will of God, and we keep on moving. Thank you so much. And tomorrow we go to 3 numbers, 100. We'll be doing lesson 100. We'll be glad that you'll be there with us. Thank you. I'm out of here. My name is Oliver Blue, and love is enough. Bye-bye.